Hey, welcome, family, friends, loved ones, enemies, frenemies, wizards, witches, muggles, people of Middle Earth, people of other Earths. Also, welcome to Greg Tompsett, regular guest of Disguise Coverage, host of the Cover One Buffalo podcast, and person who's joining me tonight for the Buffalo Bills Mailbag, Ask Cover One episode of Disguise Coverage here. How you feeling, Greg?
Good. As a interesting nugget, several people based on Twitter debates today were trying to disinvite me from Earth. So I may be from one of the other Earths soon.
It's been an interesting day. It's been a good day for spirited debates. Some things about certain Buffalo Bills players or certain positional players that may be acquired from the Philadelphia Eagles and their relevance to the Buffalo Bills. Certain debates on whether or not professional wrestling is a sport. That was also spirited and lively today. I've also got a fun fact. I've been doing fun facts on the show, and I had already planned this fun fact regardless of the spirited wrestling debate that we had on Twitter earlier today. But 25 years ago today, Kevin Nash, a.k.a. Diesel at the time in the WWF, showed up on Monday Night Nitro to join his buddy Scott Hall, a.k.a. Razor Ramon, as the NWO angle and the Outsiders angle started to go, full board, started to get rolling, and we would just be roughly a month away from Hulk Hogan making the turn and the NWO being a thing. And I have, you'll enjoy this. So in the spirit of wrestling, I've known that wrestling was like scripted since I was literally three. I remember watching it on TV and my dad saying, well, it's not real. And I said, well, what do you mean? And I remember him saying, Anthony, if you punch another man in the face, either his face breaks or your hand breaks. So you can't punch someone for 20 minutes on TV and be okay. And I was like, oh. So I always knew it was like scripted. But my dad, that was also the same day. It's just so weird. It was also the same day I was asking him what the Pittsburgh Steelers steal. Like, what do they take? And he was like, no, it's like a reference to steel, like manufacturing. They make steel. I was like, right. But what are they taking from people? He was like, it's not the same word. And I was like, got it. So they're not taking anything. And he was like, you're an idiot. But my dad, who always knew wrestling was scripted, kind of whatever, when Hulk Hogan joined the NWO, a man that never showed any emotion for wrestling, a man who used to mock myself and my brother for showing emotion for wrestling, Hulk Hogan goes to the corner. And mind you, my older brother had been taunting my dad all day, just being like, Hogan's going to be the third man. Hogan's going to be the third man. Dad was like, shut up. No, it's not. No way. Hogan goes to the corner. He leans back on the buckle, comes forward, and he drops the leg on Macho Man. And my dad stood up, and he threw the remote control at the TV, and he stormed out of the living room, and we didn't see him for the rest of the night. That is my favorite wrestling story. The man who, from the time I was a small baby, was like, wrestling's fake and showed no emotion. Yeah, that turn. And
apparently he cared.
He did care. So the part of him, he was just trying to deny it. But yeah, and that's tied into that fun fact from today. Kevin Nash starts to move the needle forward and got a lot of things going on in the wrestling world 25 years ago today. And currently in the world today, in the Buffalo Bills world, we got a lot of stuff going on. OTAs have been happening. Someone already commented in the chat, are we getting Ertz? There's a lot of stuff going on as we start to move towards the season. I mentioned it a couple of weeks ago on Disguise Coverage, where now that OTAs have started to kick off, it seems kind of out of nowhere. The start of the regular season is right around the corner. We've got the preseason coming up. We've got mandatory mini camp coming up. We've got training camp. Like we're close to it, and we're about to get into the nitty gritty. And I think that's within that vein that we wanted to do this mailbag episode tonight and start to answer some questions, because there's a lot of pressing issues regarding the Buffalo Bills as we start to move forward towards the season.
I agree. It's going to be kind of fun leading into here. It's different. For years we had different debates about, hey, which undrafted free agent we need to step into one of the 7 starting spots that we had, needing them to be filled by undrafted free agents because the 7 draft picks were already filling the other 7 starting spots that were needed.
Is Kyle Orton the franchise quarterback?
Yes, it's nice that now we're kind of poking around at weirder fringe elements and talking about these things, but it is interesting. And I was impressed with the questions we got today, and I think we should dive right in.
We're going to dive right in. I want to pull this comment up first from Earl, regarding the Hulk Hogan, the where were you moment. Yeah, I think a lot of people can pinpoint where exactly were you when Hulk Hogan turned. You joined the NWO. A lot of backstory. I could do hours of episodes on just that angle and that story in wrestling in general. Jeremy's got a question about Zach Ertz already. We're about to get into that. Liam said, "Hey, what's up, Liam? How you doing?
What's going on?"
So we're going to jump right into it, as Greg said, and we pulled these questions from Twitter, but we also pulled, I guess, priority for the questions that came from the Cover One Slack channel, which is, I don't know, Greg, you're a lot more active in the Slack channel than I am. Why don't you let the good people know why the Slack channel is so awesome and how you get to be in it?
Yeah, it's all. You can join the Cover One premium membership. You get awesome content like the articles from Rob Quinn and Kyle Silgi and all the guys that are doing fantastic work on the website, and our man Liam, who is our newest intern as well, creating beautiful content. You also get access to the Cover One Slack channel, which is awesome, and it's like your own personal, like, Bills Twitter hub. But just with fun, informed takes, and there's all kinds of different groups and rooms, and early access to the film breakdowns that we do, early access to a lot of the interviews that we do, and all kinds of fun things as well. And honestly, just a great community of good people.
Oh, it's a good way to put it. Great community of good people. I think, honestly, I've been mentioning for the last several weeks. I've referenced multiple Rob Quinn articles and episodes that I've done here. Same thing with Kyle and Liam. If you needed another reason to get the Cover One premium content aside from the article access, the Slack channel is even more phenomenal, and you get to chat with amazing, handsome cap gurus like Greg Tompsett all the time, and he'll respond to you like a fantastic person. So that's where we started in terms of where we started to pull our questions from. And to Jeremy's question in the chat already, are we getting Ertz? This question is related to that. So the first question that we're going to get into right now is, Greg, I know you have no feelings or emotions about this question whatsoever. Would Zach Ertz actually improve this offense drastically enough to justify the acquisition, or could it potentially just hinder Dawson Knox's development?
So obviously, Jeremy is asking that, and this is coming up tonight because there was just a tweet from Josina Anderson, and what she shared was that there is discussion and concern about the consistency and productivity of the Bills tight end group, and that's why Zach Ertz's name has come up. I can confirm with certainty, I've talked to enough different sources who have knowledge of the situation, that the talks are real. Like the fact that Brandon Beane and Howie Roseman have negotiated together and that there is interest in a trade. That is 100% real. That is not some trumped up, rumor or something like that. That is real. Now, Howie Roseman is a notoriously stubborn man, and that doesn't mean a trade's going to get done. Like it's totally possible that Zach Ertz never gets traded to the Bills. But the fact that Brandon Beane is interested, sees value in him, and is pursuing for months now. This has been going on 2 months as far as I know. 2 months worth of discussions and negotiation. He's interested. Like, he wants this player. He just has a price. So that leads into the question that we got here. And that there is a price that matters. And I've kind of joked that for each $1 million that the Eagles eat in his salary, I'll give him an extra round higher of a draft pick. And that's half of a joke. That's actually not that far
like
off.
A half truth.
Because if they get it down to like $3.5-4 million, I might kick him a 4th round pick. Like, it's that range. I would love, my ideal is $4 million and a 5th round pick. I'd like them to take half, and we'll give him a 5th. I'm confident Roseman wants more than that. I don't think that's far off of what Brandon Beane wants. I think he's realistic. I don't think he wants a 7th round pick and $1 million. Like, I think he's realistic that we're gonna probably need half-ish of the money. And just anybody who's not aware, his contract for 2021 is $8.25 million. So that $4 million is right around there. Optimistically, I'd love 3.5. Yeah. If it's 4.5 or $5 million, that's the range I'm assuming it's going to get to. But that's the ballpark, and that I think that acquisition cost is worth it. Taking on the whole $8.25 million, I would not be interested. Honestly, maybe even for a 7th-round pick. It's right around there. I'd get over it, but I wouldn't be ecstatic if we took on that whole contract without him restructuring. If we take him on, I would want like 2 more years extended and to spread out some money and do like a Tyler Kroft type 3-year, $18 million deal that spreads some of that money around. So that takes care of the acquisition cost. There is a cost that makes sense. There is a point that I think it'd be too much. The third point that he asked about was, is he going to take away from Dawson Knox development or the snaps and things like that? I understand the argument. I think it's valid that live reps in NFL games are an irreplaceable path to development.
Yep.
But I'll counter. We talked pre-show. Has that prohibited the development of Dallas Goedert? Because he looks pretty good in Philadelphia.
He looked pretty good on my fantasy team last year.
Well, he doesn't seem to have been prohibited from developing behind Zach Ertz, and 2 of those awesome productivity seasons were with Dallas Goedert on the team. So, I don't think that's the reason that Dawson Knox is or is not going to develop. And if our worst case scenario is Dawson Knox breaks out and Zach Ertz is just a really high level Tyler Kroft, awesome. Yeah. Fantastic. And if we don't have any injuries, that's an awesome luxury that we had. But if we do end up with injuries, that could be really nice.
You mentioned you and I talking offline before the episode started. I'm not baffled and not at a loss for words, so I don't want to say that. The fact that I just said it, but I don't want to say it. There's been certain questions, just like in the money aspect plays a large part for me as it does for you. I don't want to sit there and eat like, oh yeah, we gave a 4th for Zach Ertz and we have to eat all of his salary. Like, I don't want to do those types of things. And even to your point, like the 7th and all the money, I'm still a little, ugh. But in a vacuum, Zach Ertz is a better tight end than Dawson Knox right now. And I don't think there's a question about that. I recognize Dawson Knox's athleticism. I recognize that Zach Ertz doesn't have the yards after catch aspect. People always love to make the joke of like, well, he's going to catch the ball and then he's going to get caught right away and get tackled and get dropped. Fair. But when it comes to, and especially in answering this question of, does Zach Ertz improve this offense drastically enough to justify the acquisition? I think given the money, and depending on how you're defining the word drastically, I think he does. His ability to leverage coverage and find holes in the zone, very similar to what Emmanuel Sanders does.
Sure.
Now, if you want to make the case of, those are like multiple players like Ertz, Sanders, Cole Beasley that all do the same type of thing. If you want to argue that point, I think that's a different discussion, but I think that's a little more fair. But there's been a lot of talk of, the difference between Ertz and Knox is negligible, or I'd rather take Knox. Somebody, I forget when last week, it was like, just because Knox is more athletic, I'd rather have Knox. And I feel like you're doing, I feel like a disservice to yourself and to Zach Ertz for knocking what he's done. I know you rattled it off offline. What's the, or close to it, what's the stat of what he's had the last several years, the last 3 seasons?
It was in a debate earlier today, so I think I can still remember it. The 5 previous seasons from 2015 to 2019, they would have been the 5 best tight end seasons in Buffalo Bills history. They averaged 86 catches for 916 yards and had a peak of 116 catches for 1,100 yards and 8 touchdowns. Saying that that's just, it's purely volume driven and Dawson Knox could do that. No, he couldn't.
Yeah. No.
Nuh-uh.
No.
That's just, it's not that simple. And in the NFL, I do agree that some stats are volume based and that some people are fed the ball to the point where it inflates their value. In general,
yes,
targets are earned and targets are a talent driven statistic. They are not just randomly given out like candy. Coaches see people in practice. They know the talent on their team. The targets go to the best people, not just randomly given out. And anybody could do this with that amount of touches. It's not that simple.
Correct. And I like what you said earlier regarding the development aspect. I think live reps play a role in that, but I don't think Ertz coming to the team potentially is a death knell for the development of Dawson Knox. I don't think that means he's done.
Just like the opposite doesn't mean that giving live reps to Dawson Knox means he has to develop. It doesn't.
Correct. It doesn't. They are not.
We spent 17 years of a drought seeing really bad players get a ton of reps and not get any better.
That's true. That's not a like for if it was an easy 1-for-1, then everybody who gets drafted would be if every top
They'd all
10
just
pick
get
would
better.
become correct. They'd be the best players in the league, and it's not an exact science. And I like even just having the acquisition of Ertz, even if we don't use it a lot. I like the idea of maybe we can run some more 12 personnel. Not that we need to, but I'd like to have that extra little weapon in our arsenal if we need to. And I don't recognize the athleticism aspect. I don't think Ertz is enough of a hindrance to Dawson Knox to shy me away from getting Zach Ertz. And I think if we're just looking at it in a vacuum of who's the better tight end right now, I'm not talking about development. I'm not talking about contract. I'm not talking about what we have to give up in order to acquire him. If you're just looking at it in a vacuum, are we a better team with Zach Ertz or a better team with Dawson Knox? I think we're a better team with Zach Ertz.
And I'll even add to that, I feel strongly it doesn't need to be that binary.
Correct.
We are a better team with Zach Ertz, Dawson Knox, and Jacob Hollister than we are with Dawson Knox, Jacob Hollister, and Tommy Sweeney. It's better with those three than the other three. So it's not Zach Ertz versus Dawson Knox. It's Zach Ertz versus Tommy Sweeney. Like, that's the guy who gets bumped off. We still get Dawson Knox. We still have him. Last year, the Bills had 1,067 snaps played by a tight end without increasing anything. We had 480 played by Dawson Knox. We can easily have 500 snaps played by Zach Ertz and Dawson Knox and not have any more tight end heavy formations or usage. We had the most 3 and 4 wide receiver sets in the NFL at 86%. That's cool. We would still have been number 1 in the NFL at 80%. We had the second fewest 2 tight end snaps in the NFL, or 12 personnel, at only 8%. I'd be totally fine still leading the league in 3 and 4 wide receiver sets at 80% and having 14% 12 personnel and still being bottom half of the league, but just not second fewest in the league. Just to give defensive coordinators another thing to plan for. Just to have some options if you have a really light defense and they're throwing light boxes at you, and we want to have 2 tight ends out there to run the ball a little bit and then say, oh, we're going to do play action, and now we have 2 weapons who are athletic to go towards. I just want another tool in Brian Daboll's tool belt, and I think that Zach Ertz gives them that. You mentioned the zone coverage and him sitting down in spots and playing leverage earlier. There's also an element where later on in the year, early on, teams were playing man and blitzing the crap out of Josh Allen and saying, I bet you can't beat us. When he started torching everybody, teams pivoted over and started playing zone. Well, when you played zone, we really only had Cole Beasley to kind of light it up, and it took John Brown a little bit out of action. It made it tougher on Gabe Davis. They figured some things out later in the season. Stephon Diggs is going to eat no matter what. But having a second option who can play leverage and find soft spots in the zone. Now you can't lean on Cole Beasley because we have Zach Ertz as a big slot on the other side. It just gives you more options. It gives you more variability, and I just want and we saw last year that the wide receivers were kind of run down by the end of the year. Both Cole Beasley and Stephon Diggs kind of hobbling to the finish line. I wouldn't mind having another option there in case we ran into some injury issues.
For sure, and he's a reliable, very strong safety net option. And I think also the last thing I wanted to say on it, to your point, you mentioned Dallas Goedert. For all the conversation of like, oh, how much does it stunt Dawson Knox's development, so on and so forth, you could also make the case on the other side that adding Zach Ertz and the type of player that he is on and off the field, Dawson Knox, even though he may see less snaps, he might become a better tight end after this year because of playing alongside Zach Ertz and having that person in the tight end room with him. So I think you hit it on the head. I think a lot of people are looking at it so binary and just looking at it very black and white and ones and zeros, and there's a lot more gray to it. And yeah, but that was a really good question.
I don't know that we're going to have a lot of time to get to other tight end questions. So I've heard solid things about Tommy Sweeney. Yes, I think he's having a fine camp. I also don't think he's a guy that we'd have to worry about not being able to get back on the practice squad. I don't think there are people beating down the door to get a 7th-round pick who sat out a year with myocarditis that I'm guessing that if we waived him, we could get him back on the practice squad. So, maybe that's an assumption on my part, but in the past 3 years, we've had one player picked up on waivers, and that was Vincent Taylor. So we always assume everybody's going to get picked up on waivers, and it just doesn't happen.
They never do. Duke Williams, cough, cough. Yes, I second that on Sweeney. I've heard he's looked good. I've seen some things he's looked good, but I don't think he's looked good to the point that it's like, well, if we cut him loose, we're never going to be able to get him back. Next question that we got also from the Slack channel. Who would be a potential? We also got this question from Twitter as well, from multiple people. Who is a potential surprise cut candidate for you? I struggled with this one because, like, you're the definition of like surprise. Like, if somehow we cut. I'm sorry, I'm laughing because someone said Sweetie Todd, and then the response was the Demon Barber of Chippewa Street. That was very funny.
Anybody, getting into the comments, make sure you're checking it out. It's always a good time.
And then based on how some of our conversations went, Sweeney Todd started as a Broadway play. Broadway play, is it a sport?
Could be a sport. Could be a sport. You never know. So how about a surprise to you, Isaiah McKenzie? That would be a surprise to me that I don't think is. I think it's a non-zero chance. I think there's a chance that Isaiah McKenzie gets cut.
Especially if they put Breida at kick return or Marquez Stevenson is able to do double duty. Yep, wins both. And then it's like, we know you love candy, but we don't have a spot for you, Isaiah. I'm sorry.
A couple other names that came up. I'd be mildly surprised if Tywan Jones got cut, but I think it's possible. I think that I don't think that we cut AJ Klein, but that one would be, I guess, possible.
The contract is so. I think next year he's a candidate for that, but right now I'm not now.
And then you have so far the only draft picks who have been released have been like Voshon Joseph and Austin Prohl. Even last year, Isaiah Hodgins made the 53 and then got put on IR. So I would say I'd be mildly surprised, but I guess if Stevenson or Hamlin or anyone besides Jack Anderson, any one of the earlier picks before their wild goose, I'd be mildly surprised with any of them either.
I'm going to second that. I'm laughing because the truth to heart said Allen getting cut would surprise me. Yeah, if Josh Allen got cut, that would surprise me as well.
Very surprising.
Isaiah McKenzie is up there, I think, not for me personally, because I don't think Stevenson wins the punt returner job, but as you've mentioned several times on the Cover One Buffalo podcast with Aaron, we talked about it throughout draft season. Isaiah McKenzie is a guy, despite the fact that he had that awesome touchdown on the punt return against Miami in Week 17, his NFL career has been marred by fumbles at that punt return spot. He's never been able to solidify that position and lock that position down. So there is definitely a chance that either a combination of him not playing good combined with Stevenson looking fantastic leads to Isaiah McKenzie getting bounced. But that wouldn't be completely surprising to me. Go ahead.
And obviously, money speaks for itself. Isaiah McKenzie was a 25-year-old unrestricted free agent coming off a season that he scored 8 touchdowns and was healthy and dynamic. And he came back to the Bills for a minimum contract after sitting out as a free agent for a couple days. And I know he said fun things about you could pay me in candy. I wanted to come back. Believe me, if somebody else offered a 2-year deal with guaranteed money, he was going to sign it. So maybe he got offered other minimum contracts.
Yeah.
And he chose our minimum contract versus other minimum contracts. He did not turn down materially more money from other teams to come back or longer term deals. So, he's really fun. I like him a lot. I think people underestimate the fact that 5'7", 180 is not real big.
Yeah.
And that, he's quick, but he's not that fast. So there are some limitations in what he is, and I will be perfectly fine if he's still on this team. But I do think that if Marquez Stevenson can catch punts, he's going to be in trouble.
Yeah, I agree. That's my one for offense. And you also mentioned one for defense. If somehow, granted, we're still light at the position anyway, but if somehow Tariq Thompson comes in and lights camp on fire and Hamlin not so much, maybe Hamlin gets cut. I don't see that happening, so I would be surprised in that regard. I also think that even if Tariq Thompson does good, I think Hamlin is going to do well as well.
Agreed.
But I would be surprised by that. That's a bigger personal surprise for me. Like if they cut him, I'd be like, man, he either did terrible or it most likely Thompson for me came in and just set camp on fire and didn't make a mistake and was amazing in every regard. That would surprise me big time.
If you want my feelings on Tariq Thompson and DeMar Hamlin, please check out last night's Cover One Buffalo safety position preview in the business. That's what we call a tease.
The teaser, I was going to call it a plug. I mean, I haven't been in the
Same.
business as long as you. I'm probably
Same.
wrong. Also, wrestling's a sport. Next question coming to us from the Slack channel. I like this question. How would you scheme coverage against A.J. Brown and Julio Jones? Cover zero, blitz everyone, put Levi Wallace on an island, and go from there. I'll lead with this one. So this is obviously you can't be predictive of like things like this, but this is a scenario for me now where that corner 2 aspect is not rearing its ugly head, but as much as I like Levi Wallace and I think he's got a high floor, am I comfortable with Levi in a straight one-on-one situation with either of these guys? No, I am not. Almost to the point of no disrespect to Trey, but these guys would present problems for Tre'Davious White. They're 2 phenomenal receivers, and they're also the type of receiver that gives Bills corners problems because even Tre'Davious White, for as great as he is, he's not a physical specimen. He's not overly big, overly strong. He's not tremendously fast. He's got great technique, and he's got a great head. He's great hand placement, feet, all that kind of stuff. But when you're going up against guys like this who are physical monsters, size, speed, length, and are good heady players and have that ability, anybody's going to struggle. So in terms of the scheme and the coverage, I don't think it's going to be anything. I feel like this is kind of like a blah or bland answer. I don't think it's anything that we've seen differently of what we normally do. We're going to roll our zone coverage out there. If we somehow end up in a potential cover 1 scenario, no pun intended, I think we're going to end up rolling coverage over to Levi's side or whoever that corner 2 is, and Trey plays on his island a little bit. But I think you're going to see a lot of mix-ups of zone coverages, whether it's cover 3, cover 4, rolling with cover 6, and trying to do what we can do zone-wise, which is the primary aspect of this defense. You're just going to have to be cognizant of you've got 2 monsters on each side. How do we deal with them? And then if we're rolling help to one side, it's going to be to that corner 2 side rather than Trey's side. And as Liam mentioned in the chat, how do you deal with Julio and A.J. Brown? You score 40. Yeah, that's kind of the
super
bogey.
straightforward. Well, and I mean, you touch on it, but it's I'm going to say it flippantly, but that's why we play zone. It's because when you're building a scheme like the Bills have, it's to insulate you from, oh man, who do we have that can lock down Tyreek Hill? Oh, the answer is going to be no one no matter what, so why pretend to have that?
Well, that's like the conversation. Well, we shouldn't have re-signed Milano. He couldn't cover Travis Kelce. Can anyone?
Yeah, no one can. It's part of our scheme. I get it's frustrating, and that's not to say that it's acceptable for Tyreek Hill to take a slant for 75 yards. Like, that play was still backbreaking in the AFC Championship game. That play didn't happen because of man or because of zone. It was just an elite athlete making a big play. So, one, that's why we do a lot of too high. That's why you have, 2 versatile safeties who can lend help. That's why you have really versatile linebackers underneath who can lend help, get into passing lanes, try to, that's why you improve your pass rush to get there. But ultimately, 2 big, strong athletes, it's challenging. Now, the reason that Tennessee needed to go trade for Julio Jones is they had no one behind A.J. Brown at receiver or tight end. And, if you're telling me that, hey, if we're going to devote extra attention, Matt Milano, we're going to need you to really take away Anthony Firkser, okay, I think we might be able to do that.
I tried super hard to pick him up on waivers in fantasy last year, and I could not get him. I've tried multiple times.
And Josh Reynolds?
Yes, Josh Reynolds was going to be the wide receiver too.
If hey Taryn, we're going to need you to do a good job on Josh Reynolds because we're going to let Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde help with Julio and A.J. Brown. Okay, and then it's going to be, hey, Dane Jackson and Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer and Trey White, we need you guys to do your best on them. Okay, I'll take my odds there. And that, hey, if we get beat up because Anthony Firkser goes off in single coverage, I'll live with that. But that's why we run what we do. That's why you have that kind of system. We prevent big plays. Micah Hyde has given up the fewest big plays in the NFL in his tenure here. I don't think that's going to dramatically change, but they're elite athletes and they can get behind people and make big plays. I think that Liam's half kidding. I don't think it's going to be that hard to put up 40 on Tennessee's defense. So I think that's going to be part of the battle is, can we simply put up more big plays than what they do?
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to go with it. And in a nutshell, I think what you're getting from Greg and I on this is kind of going to get what you normally get from the Bills defense. They're going to run zone, they're going to run cover 3, they're going to run cover 4, of which they did a lot last year. That is, those are the two predominant coverages they roll. We're going to continue to do that. We're going to have to execute at a higher level. I also like the little wonder if anyone picked up on it when you mentioned who is going to be covering a secondary, and you mentioned Dane Jackson instead of Levi Wallace, as if that is a potential thing that you think Dane Jackson will be the corner 2 this year instead of Levi Wallace.
It may be a thing.
Interesting. Another good question. I like this one. Besides Josh Allen, I like all these questions. Besides Josh Allen, who is the MVP of the Buffalo Bills?
So it's funny. Towards the end of the show last night, Aaron and I got into like who could we least afford to lose, and like, hey, if this guy went out, how, and like, oh man, what if we lost Deion Dawkins, or hey, what if we lost it, in it for me, because of the depth on the team and because of where we have strong talent, and I like creative. Sorry. I respect all creative solutions. So tying Julio Jones cleats together
could be very good.
Brandon Beane's a really good answer.
That's a good one if we're looking at off the field. Yeah.
I think it's either Trey or one of the safeties, and I honestly think Dane Jackson and Levi Wallace combination are a higher floor than needing a Jaquan Johnson or a DeMar Hamlin.
You bite your tongue on Jaquan Johnson. How dare you?
I don't want that subpar athlete playing 1,000 snaps. He's a fun story. Maybe he turns into something, but so I kind of think it's Micah Hyde. I kind of think Micah Hyde is the sneaky next level most valuable player, because for me, most valuable means who could we least afford to lose. I think I would pick Micah Hyde.
Oh, I like that. I think it's interesting that we've got multiple votes for Tyler Bass for this. I don't know
if you don't have a kicker, it is kind of hard to play a full complete game of football. So
I think looking at your answer through the lens of who can you least afford to lose, because when I initially thought of this answer, I thought, okay, well, like, who are the top guys? I was gonna be like,
Trey White or Stephon Diggs,
exactly,
are the two best players on the team.
But then my thought, as great as Stephon Diggs has been, if Diggs were to go down, knock on wood, and bite my tongue, I think we could mitigate that to a decent enough degree. If Tre'Davious White went down, God forbid, bite my tongue, to your point, I think the floor of Levi and Dane, okay, both of those options going in for Trey is better than either Jaquan Johnson or DeMar Hamlin or Tariq Thompson or whoever stepping in for Micah Hyde or Jordan Poyer. Deion Dawkins, to Liam's point here, is also up there for
that
me.
That became my debate was, like, is it, so who would I least like to see play? And you're debating Gabriel Davis versus Dane Jackson or Levi Wallace, whichever one's not the starter. So let's say Dane Jackson, because let's assume Levi's starting, and it would be Dane Jackson. So Gabe Davis, Dane Jackson, Spencer Brown, or Jaquan Johnson. And for me, I put that in the order. I would rather see Gabe Davis. I would rather see Dane Jackson. I would rather see Spencer Brown. And that Jaquan Johnson, if I was an offensive coordinator, I would immediately go at Jaquan Johnson every snap I could.
We've talked about it together. You've talked about it on Cover One. I've talked about it in disguise coverage, and I also made a joke to you and Aaron earlier today. The aspects of what Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer do, to, all pun intended, to allow the Bills defense to disguise coverage is tremendous. The fact, I don't think it gets talked about enough with the defense, that we've seen for so long in the NFL, forever almost, free safety, strong safety, all these things. And we have two safeties for the Buffalo Bills that are almost universal in their versatility. Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer, granted, one may have more strengths to another area than the other. Hyde is better, I think, deep than Poyer is, and Poyer's better around the line of scrimmage. But they almost function interchangeably. And what they're able to do, so all of a sudden, if one of them goes down and Jaquan Johnson goes in, you pretty much know Jaquan Johnson isn't dropping in that deep third. He's got to live in the hook zones and the flats and all that kind of stuff. He doesn't have that ability to go deep. And I've also talked about it. I feel like I'm saying this multiple times, and you and Aaron spoke about it in an episode of the Cover One Buffalo podcast. Something that needs to be looked at going forward over the next several years. What are we doing to address the safety position? Because I love Jordan Poyer, I love Micah Hyde, but they're both 30. That neither of them are the fastest or most fleet of foot. And if they were to get injured, or as we start to get a little older, that position is so important to this defense and their role and their type. It's going to start to be tough. Oh, and the guy who said I need voice altering software got blocked. That sucks. I wanted to chat with him and have him hear my voice more. I think it's melodic. And also, people have told me I'm the songbird of my generation. So you need to get your ears checked. I think that's a sneaky thought. Because I think we had this conversation with so many things, especially going back to free agency. I think Tre'Davious White is a better corner than Jordan Poyer or Micah Hyde are a safety. That's not a knock against either of them. It's just that Trey White is so good. But the drop-off from Trey to next man up versus Poyer and Hyde to next man up, I don't think it's any comparison. Like, that's a scary thought.
And a couple of people asked this as well. We actually, because of the extensions, we have both safeties signed this year and next year, and actually Micah's extension goes 1 year beyond that into 2023. So 2021 and 2022, we have both guys under contract. And safety is not that odd to see someone play well. They'll be 30 and 31 this year. Next year they'll be 31 and 32. Yeah. That's not crazy to think they can still play well. So I do think that a safety pick is needed. Mm-hmm. It might be next year. It could even be the year after that. Like, it's not that, eminent that, hey, we have to do it now. And they might want to see what they have in DeMar Hamlin and be able to go that route. It's also a position that knowledge and experience matter a lot. It might be a spot they just plan to replace via free agency like they did with both Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer. It may not be. So I will say I would doubt both will be a draft and develop position. Maybe one is. I would guess one of them, whenever the Father Time is undefeated, whenever the guys aren't ready anymore, that one of it would be a free agent signing.
I think that's a fair assumption. And to your point, on their age, they are 30, but I think at least they've got 3 years of quality football left in them. And if they can, get some of that Tom Brady magic water and fight Father Time a little more and keep playing until they're 75, you got to think that they will.
Lots of safeties had played well into their mid-30s, so playing beyond 31 and 32 is not a reach.
No, I would second that notion. Yeah, fair question. Ooh, how many? This has been echoed multiple times. So the question initially was, but it's also tied in with another one, so I'm just going to put the bundle here. So the initial one of the questions was, how many defensive linemen make the 53? But we're going to incorporate it into a larger question of multiple position groupings. So defensive line, corner, and wide receiver. We'll start with defensive line. How many defensive linemen do we think make the roster, considering that my math may be off? I believe we have 79 defensive linemen under contract as of now.
It's very, very close. So just a quick tip, if you are in the Cover One Slack channel, you will get to see much of the great work of Liam. One of the best things he does, he did a really good mock off-season exercise on Reddit. He did a lot of really good prep, and in leading up to that, and he's done this in other off-seasons, he does a really good exercise with going through the logic of the roster building piece, and that, hey, here are just the core requirements. Like, we're going to have at least 2 quarterbacks. We're going to have at least 3 running backs. We're going to have at least, 6 wide receivers. We're going to have at least, 3 tight ends. We're going to have at least 8 offensive linemen. We're going to have at least 8 defensive linemen, going through each of the position groups. And you get to 45 pretty fast. The 3 specialists, all the different pieces of it. You get to 45 pretty fast. And then you basically have 8 positions that are a mix of, sure, I guess you could call Tyler Medikevich the 6th linebacker, but really he's a special teams guy, or Tywan Jones the 4th running back, or Saran Neal the 6th cornerback. None of those guys are playing linebacker, running back, or cornerback. They're just not. So then that probably takes up 4 of those spots. Then you're going to get into guys who probably still need to play special teams, but might make the roster for other reasons as well as special teams. Obviously, last year defensive line, we did show an appetite to play 9 and to keep 9 for a reasonable period of time. When you sign Efe Obada and then draft 2 more defensive ends, I find it really hard to believe we don't have at least 5. I joke maybe Efe Obada ends up the new AJ McCarron, where he gets traded before he ever plays a regular season game with the Bills. But I like that signing. I was excited about adding Efe Obada. Justin saying 10, I don't think it's crazy. I think if you end up with a crazy spot like Daryl Johnson just can't get beat out for his 4-way special teams ability, or that, hey, they really want to keep Efe Obada and Harrison Phillips, because honestly right now I kind of think it's Efe Obada, Daryl Johnson, and Harrison Phillips for one spot. When you have 5 or 6 defensive ends and 4 or 5 of them can all rotate in as third down pass rushers and inside pass rushers, and that they've already talked about Carlos Basham can even play inside on some rundowns. Maybe by name it ends up 6 defensive ends and 3 defensive tackles and 9 linemen, but maybe the mix, and because of how many defensive ends like Obada and like Addison and like Epinesa and like Russo and like Basham can all kick in inside, pretty much everybody but Jerry Hughes, maybe we only need 3 defensive tackles. I don't know. It's I think it's 9. I think it's 5 defensive ends and 4 defensive tackles, but it pains me to cut or trade away someone like Obada and Daryl Johnson and people like that who I think are talented. But right now I would guess 9.
Do you think so? Let's for the sake of the exercise. So Jerry Hughes, Mario Addison, AJ Epinesa, Gregory Rousseau, Carlos Basham, another defensive end.
I would then go to Starr, Oliver, Butler because of the contract, and then you get to, I think it's still Phillips over Zimmer or Obada or Bam Johnson.
Agreed.
In that final group. So unless they get to 10, I don't see a path.
If they were to push to 10, say it's between Obada, Daryl Johnson, and Justin Zimmer, who do you think gets the nod for that 10th spot?
I'd cut Mario Addison.
I canceled the team.
So, obviously I'm joking because we missed that boat. Our chance to cut Mario Addison was before he took a pay cut. When he took a pay cut, they guaranteed a big chunk of his contract. We don't really even save any money by releasing him. Technically, you could kick a little bit into next year, and maybe it creates like $1 million in savings or something stupid. But we've guaranteed a big chunk of his contract. I'm intrigued enough. Harrison Phillips looks jacked right now. He's like 312 pounds, and he didn't have any fat on him.
I'm also a fan of that. I don't want to say narrative, but the idea that he is another year removed from that ACL injury, and he should be a lot better. We saw how strong he was. I think Eric tweeted out from week 12 on, I think he was in top 5 for run defense grade in the NFL last year, and he's only been getting healthier. And to your point, he looks phenomenal.
And I know these narratives get played up and are silly, but a piece of me wonders if a wrestler who's Josh Allen's best friend and is the NFL Man of the Year award winner from the team is kind of harder to cut.
That's fair.
Like, I don't think that's an actual reason that someone makes the team when they don't deserve it.
Right.
But if you're telling me it comes down to a new free agent signing that nobody really knows, or the guy who is the quarterback's best friend and probably the more needed position at one tech and the NFL Walter Payton Man of the Year award winner and all those things, maybe that's, it's harder to get rid of that guy than to get rid of a new guy you just signed 2 months ago.
I think that's spot on. Yeah, I think it's going to come down in the 9 or 10, and then as we function that versatility piece into the equation. I also like the idea from Randy.
Super easy. Angel, would you trade Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs for 3 Super Bowl wins? Yes, that's super easy.
I would trade anyone for a Super Bowl
All
win.
The players on the team. 3 Super Bowl wins, I would trade Sean McDermott. I would trade Brandon Beane. I would trade every single person associated with the team. 3 Super Bowl wins? Yep, sign me up.
Yep. If I had to go punt a baby to get a Super Bowl, throw me a baby, I'll punt it right now. Whatever gets me the ring, man.
3 Super Bowl wins? Yeah, no.
3 rings?
No one is there. No one is sacred.
No.
I would trade everyone. No one is sacred.
Yeah, I don't. There was a discussion earlier, like, oh, would you, the scenario of like, oh, if Josh Allen goes down and Trubisky leads us to a Super Bowl, and then you're in an Eagles scenario, would you take it? I was like, yeah. And then people were like, oh, but like, I don't want to give up the window. We've been in the NFL for a long time. We don't have one ring.
The point of the window is to get a ring. I just want
the ring. I just want one. Like, and I'm not even asking for a lot. And yeah, John, things got dramatic real quickly.
It took a turn.
Arrived late. Yeah, it took a turn. It's been an interesting day. And as Bills Mafia SDF mentions, I will give my kidney tomorrow for one. Yeah, I would also give your kidney for. Oh man, handsome man would trade his mom. That's dramatic.
Yeah, that's right there with punting babies. That's
I'm
right.
In that boat.
That's right there.
I'm in that boat. Yeah, I mean, I would trade whoever for a Super Bowl. And the comment that I was going to pull up from Randy earlier, his idea was if we could just move Duke Williams to defensive end and then push Jerry Hughes out. Which,
I mean, if he's already moving to tight end, he's already bulked up. He's probably ready. He could probably pretty easily do that.
Right? Oh, this is, would you trade the logo and the colors for 3 rings? Yeah. That's super funny. I like that too.
You know?
Another tight end question. Do Reggie Gilliam and Jacob Hollister both make the 53?
No.
That's a real... Yeah, I don't think so.
No. So I was a fan of Reggie Gilliam last year. I had him projected to make the 53 as the only UDFA. He is... I don't care what they list him at. He's a fullback. Last year, he played 68 snaps in the backfield and 8 snaps at the line of scrimmage. So anybody who wants to argue with me that he's a tight end... Nuh-uh. However, he is the special teams H-back, move tight end, fullback guy. Jacob Hollister's all those things. He's just a little better.
Yeah.
I just... There is a path, those 8 extra spots we talked about and the 4 truly extra spots. There is a path where we keep a 4th tight end in that mix, and that maybe Gilliam beats out Sweeney as the 4th tight end because maybe he's a better fullback than Hollister is. I think Hollister is better at all the rest of the tight end things. Maybe as a legit lead blocking fullback for the 20 snaps a season, we need that. And then Gilliam also plays special teams and is pretty good at some of the other pieces. I can see a path where that happens, but I'd be pretty surprised. I think it's pretty clearly Hollister over Gilliam.
Yeah, I would completely second that notion and second that nature. I wanted to pull up this comment here from John. Well, first of all, John, thank you for the super chat. You are a consistent donator, and we appreciate you more than you'll ever know. This is the perspective when we talk about championships and rings. So John says, I'm 51. In that time, the Bills are 0 for 51. The Sabres are 0 for 51. The Buffalo Braves, now the Clippers, are 0 for 51. That's a total of 0 and 153 #winning. Yeah, the idea that we've got this window. We're bound to get a ring. Look at the time that we've had teams in the leagues, and we have not gotten a ring. So whatever you have to give up to get the ring, you get that. I think that's a tremendous.
Do you know how
point.
certain Chargers fans were? They were going to get a ring when they had Phillip Rivers, or the first year when the Dolphins went to the Super Bowl with Dan Marino. Like, we're obviously going to get one. I wouldn't trade that for anything. Of course, we're going to get one. No, you're not. You're not guaranteed anything, and it's just, some really good players have played their whole careers and never gotten a ring, and any of those scenarios, can you trade X for a Super Bowl ring? Yep. Yeah, whatever the 100%. X is. Yep.
The Dolphins analogy is great. They go to a Super Bowl early on. They're the only team to beat the 85 Bears. Everybody else in the AFC is looking down and out and not great. And Miami's thinking, oh, man, we got this. Almost similar to, I hate to make the analogy, knock on wood, but almost similar to how Bills fans are looking at the Bills right now. Who's to say that in 2 years – Tua is the truth, like a lot of people thought, and that Dolphins team is just a monster, and we can't get past Miami. So, yeah, whatever guarantee, if you guarantee me a ring right now, whatever we're giving up, I'm giving up. And to answer that question, yeah, I think Hollister, as much as I like Reggie Gilliam and I like what he brings, to your point, I think Gilliam brings that just a little more and just a little better. So I'm going to say, yeah, I don't think they both
So
make it. And I would say
Jason
Hollister.
says that we
That
have
is
two.
true.
I know.
Don't have a Super Bowl, though. Oh, look at props.
I have
You were on that team.
the Bills AFL championship ring. I want a real one. I want a Super Bowl ring. I would like one that is in the Super Bowl era and real against NFL teams.
Man, I
While
always
I'm
like.
still alive.
I wish I could just. Yeah, well, we got the AFL. I just wish they counted. And the Bills went to the first ever AFC Championship against the Chiefs, and they lost. And then the Chiefs went. I mean, I think I don't want to talk about that time, but I mean, the Bills probably get rolled by the Packers at that time because the Packers were pretty nuts. Very interesting question. Let's continue the roster allocation talk. How many wide receivers get kept? The thought from this person is we keep 6 or 7.
I mean, they've been 6 very consistently. We've had a couple small periods of time where they went down to 5 for a couple weeks. Maybe they kept 7 once or twice, but it was for like a week, and it was because of special team stuff, like a Jake Kumaro type guy who's way more special teams than a receiver. I feel pretty firmly it's going to be 6, just because I understand the talent. I like the idea of keeping Isaiah Hodgins and Isaiah McKenzie and Marcus Stevenson. That sounds fun. Our offensive and defensive lines are so deep. I think that's where the extra spots go. I could see 10 offensive linemen or 10 defensive linemen before I saw 7 wide receivers. So I definitely understand the reason people predict or want 7 receivers. I will be genuinely shocked if we keep a 7th receiver.
Yeah, I think if we're getting down to the brass tacks of it, Diggs, Beasley, Emmanuel Sanders, Gabriel Davis, those are your hard 4 locks. And then we're looking at some combo of one of the 2 Isaiahs and Marcus Stevenson and everyone else you mentioned. I would say it's 6 if the only potential way I see it giving to, and that's the conversation there. Oh, yes. I pulled it up accidentally. Awesome, Roman. That is correct. Manny Sands. Sands with a D, not Emmanuel Sanders. Manny Sands. I appreciate you for that. The comment here, until I see how the kicker return and punt return shakes out, that's what he's got. The only way I see is potentially getting to a 7th is if we save a roster spot where Marcus Stevenson is the kick returner and the punt returner somehow, and that allows us to do another move and have that 7th there. But I'm gonna think 6, and I wouldn't be shocked if it was 7, but I see it most likely being 6.
So here's one that I thought was interesting. I'm a big advocate of quarterback 3 doesn't need to be on the roster. Quarterback 3 can be on the practice squad. It's not a big deal. You get all the same stuff. I don't want it to be Jake Fromm, but I don't care. If it's Davis Webb and he's on the practice squad, it's fine. If we lose both Josh Allen and Mitch Trubisky, shit went really wrong, and the season doesn't matter anymore anyways. So quarterback 3 can be on the practice squad. I had a good question. For as much time as we spent last year with running back 3 being game day inactive, does it really matter if RB3 is on the roster?
That's a very interesting one.
Couldn't you stash Antonio Williams on the practice squad as RB3 and you call him up when you need him, because you don't make him game day active anyways? Do you need it to be TJ Yeldon as a game day inactive with warm-ups on the sideline? If they're game day inactive, so there's a couple paths like that where if we only keep 2 quarterbacks and we only keep 3 total running backs, one being Tywan Jones, but no TJ Yeldon, and we were to waive Matt Breida and we were to waive Antonio Williams to try to get both of them or at least one of them back on the practice squad, maybe that's a chance to be able to find a path, but I will be surprised if it's 7.
Same. John is the MVP for tonight already. John, again, appreciate you with the donation and the super chat. You're amazing. And he's continuing on this topic earlier of giving anything for a ring. So he watched legends like Gilbert Perreault and Martin and Alexander McGillney, LaFontaine, the greatest goalie of all time, Dominic Hasek, Ryan Miller, Phil Housley, Ramsey, Drury, Briere, and then OJ, Bruce, Jim Kelly, Terminator, Andre Reed, Daryl Talley, Molds, Freddie, Kyle Tasker. No rings with all of that. Anything for one. I second that notion completely. And I like that you're flowing that with even more examples and everything, John, because I think that I love the idea of the window, and that we could honestly do an entire episode on this, and maybe we will as we go forward here. But the idea of the window, and as Griff just put in the comments here, yeah, seriously, that 90s Bills team without a ring is gross. You can have great teams. It's hard to get a championship, especially in the NFL, where I don't want to say that in other sports that have like multiple game series like baseball, hockey, and basketball. I don't want to say that the best team always wins, but usually things even out and balance out. Things either regress positively or negatively towards the mean and things balance. But in the NFL, like the movie, any given Sunday, anything can happen. If you're off in the wrong instance, you lose. And it's hard to get a championship in anything, let alone the NFL. Oh, yeah. And yeah, to John's point here, Buffalo fans all over the world will lose their minds if the Sabres or Bills, if we ever win. And Greg, I'm glad you put that in the comments there. I saw someone flipping through the comments saying that Isaiah Hodgins is slow. He's not as slow as you think. And also, if you watch him on film, I don't think his separation is going to be revolutionary, but his footwork and his route running are tremendous. And you don't just have to be creating separation in the NFL is not uniquely or solely tied to speed.
Yeah.
Route running and technique go a long way. That's why, if it were purely speed, John Ross would be separating from everyone on every single snap.
Same kind of 40 that DeAndre Hopkins and Keenan Allen ran. It's about being a really good receiver and route runner and then having awesome hands. So don't get me wrong, would you also want that and awesome speed? Yes, because Julio Joneses are awesome and Calvin Johnsons are awesome. It's great when you get all of it. But there's way more John Rosses and way more, Marquise Goodwins out there that ran a flashy 40 but couldn't play football than there are DeAndre Hopkins and Keenan Allens. And hopefully, I don't think Isaiah Hodgins is like those guys, so don't take this wrong. Isaiah Hodgins is an NFL wide receiver. Isaiah Hodgins has phenomenal hands. I think he is going to have a role in the NFL.
Yeah, so do I.
And I don't think that the fact he ran a 4.61 and Gabe Davis ran a 4.54, that's the same kind of speed.
Yeah.
Nobody was talking about how slow Gabe Davis was last year.
No. And actually, if you see the embedded episode from last year, Bean was at the combine saying, I hope Gabriel Davis runs something in like the mid 4.5s to get people off his scent for drafting him.
Because they knew he played faster.
Correct. So don't always get...
Stevie Johnson ran a 4.59, almost identical to Isaiah Hodgins.
There we go. Oh, Randy's killing it in the comments with literally just asking how fast was Stevie, and he also...
I looked it up because of Randy asking.
Oh, nice. There you go. Good job, Randy. Well done. Yeah, there's plenty of ways to win in the NFL aside from just speed. Good question. Another roster allocation spot. How many cornerbacks are we keeping? This one, the question was, are we keeping 5 or 6?
It's in name only. So obviously the locks are Levi Wallace, Taron Johnson, Tre'Davious White, Dane Jackson. Those 4 are locks.
Yes.
The Bills list Saran Neal as a cornerback. He is a lock. He's our primary gunner, opposite Tywan Jones. I guess somebody could beat him out for that role. It is his contract year at the end of his rookie deal. There's no obligation to keep him beyond there, so I guess somebody could beat him out for that role. And then I think one of the young guys makes it. So Rashad Wildgoose clearly has a
best name ever.
Head start because of his draft status and his name. Then you have Cam Lewis, who technically beat out Taron Johnson last year at one point to take the starting spot. Yeah. People like Nick McLeod, people like Elijah Griffin. And then, obviously, I've been advocating for a Steven Nelson or a Richard Sherman or someone to come in.
Yes.
So I would feel a lot better if Levi Wallace was cornerback 3 and Dane Jackson was cornerback 4 and he was the backup for Taron Johnson. But we'll see where those things go. And that's one of the reasons I like Steven Nelson is he can play nickel. And if he went out, you just slide in Levi Wallace or Taron Johnson or Levi Wallace or Dane Jackson back at outside corner. So I think it's going to be 6 by name because I count Saran Neal as a special teamer because I do think one of the young guys make it, but then they'll be game day inactive and not really play that much.
I second that exact same scenario. It's all going to come down to that Saran Neal classification aspect. Also, in terms of the nickel conversation,
I don't think it's crazy that Cam Lewis
Cam Lewis.
Wild Goose for that spot.
I also don't think it's a crazy thing that people aren't thinking about. I tweeted out the snap counts. And I'm going to look it up right now. The snap counts for Damar Hamlin in college. So last year, 2020, he had 424 snaps in the slot. In 2019, he had 550 snaps in the slot. In 2018, he had 417. And then 2017, he had 168. Every single year, the majority of his snaps came in the slot. Granted, it was more in a safety function, but he's got a lot of experience in there. I wouldn't rule out some kind of wild scenario where he's seeing slot snaps as opposed maybe even to Wild Goose, who has a lot of things you like, but he's also got a lot of, no pun intended, like wild type of instincts and aggressiveness. That's stuff that has to get like kind of worked out and refined a little bit.
I'm excited about him in 2022, to be honest. I think that out of all the things that we've seen, what Leslie Frazier and John Butler Jr. and Sean McDermott can turn a Levi Wallace UDFA into, and Dane Jackson, Rashad Wildgoose is a better athlete than both of them. He has more special athletic traits than those guys do. I'd love to see what he could do for a year's worth of development to be ready. I don't really want to see that this year, but I'm intrigued to see him develop. And it's easy to see some of those other combinations where guys could come in. I don't know who it's going to be in that last spot. If I had to pick today, I think I'd pick Wild Goose.
Yeah, same. But it'll be interesting to see. That's a position grouping that
and young guys definitely not a lock that it's 6. It is very possible that's where that 7th receiver, that 10th defensive lineman, that 10th offensive lineman could come because they keep 5 corners, 4 safeties, and 9 defensive backs.
Especially if we see a scenario where, like I mentioned, like Damar Hamlin's pro-ready ability translates and they figure, you know what, he can actually, we're list him as a safety, but he can actually function in the slot and do some things. We only need 5 corners. So, yeah, now we're dressing and we're keeping 7 wide receivers or another. Yep, there you go.
That's how Dean Marlowe built his role.
There you go. Dean Marlowe pouring one out for him out with the Detroit Lions now. Next question. So we're done with the Slack questions. Now we're going to the Twitter questions. First one, percentage of snaps you think Gregory Rousseau will see this season, assuming the old guys like Mario Addison and Jerry Hughes stay healthy?
So, obviously, we have a little bit of a template for that because AJ Epinesa played 27%.
Yes.
That's a second-round pick versus a first-round pick. We didn't lose a lot from that defensive end group. We only really added to it. So I'm going to say 35%, but that it might start lower and build its way up as it goes. But my guess will be 35%.
I'm going to go in a similar boat with that. And some of the comments that are coming through, so a couple for 25 and one for 37%. I think you're going to see when
that's the range.
Yeah, that literally what I was going to say. I think depending on how slow he starts out, I think at the end of the year, the number averages out to somewhere in the 25 to 35% range and most likely literally somewhere in the median there. So like 30, 31, 29, something around there. Depends on how fast he progresses. And also, here's the hot take from Randy that I don't even think is that much of a hot take, saying that Carlos Basham will play more. He's more NFL ready in terms of like polish and refinement than he is raw traits than Gregory Rousseau right now. I don't think that's even that much of a crazy hot take, but if you balance it out at the end of the year, obviously I think as the year progresses, he sees more snaps a la AJ Epinesa.
But just to rattle off the end of last year, not including the last game of the year against Miami that was a throwaway, he did play 69% in that game, which is obviously nice. So 37%, 37%, 37%, 34%, 54%. the last 5 games of the year that were full effort games, you could see a role. That's where I think he ends up. But there were games early on. Obviously, he had the healthy scratch early. He did miss a game due to injury. A lot of games, 20%, 15%, 17%, 11%. Towards the end of the year, he came on and was playing really well. I won't be shocked at that kind of path for Russo. Yeah. And to be honest, and Basham, I think they both play between 25 and 40. The one caveat I will say that could push it higher is Jerry Hughes and Mario Addison are both at the wrong side of 30. It's not crazy that one of them could suffer an injury that would shoot up either one of those guys.
Yeah, but if they're both healthy, and with what I project AJ Epinesa to be, I think, in that 25 to 35% range, like you said, I think it's pretty spot on. And then obviously if there is some sort of, somebody fell off a cliff or there is an injury, obviously you uptick that a little bit, but I think it's pretty safe to say, given how we've seen things trend in the past, that 25 to 35% is a pretty safe range.
And I will say Egriff makes a good comment here about a hotter take is that Groot will be a healthy scratch a couple times. I will say Leslie Frazier's comments in his press conference about how quickly he's taking things on, how he's applying them immediately. That doesn't sound like a guy who's maybe not ready to play, but he's spot on that if he does, Bills Mafia will lose their ever-loving minds if a first-round pick is a healthy scratch.
Yeah, 1,000%. Everybody will freak out. I mean, they were doing it even for Epinesa. Like, what is going on? Why is he inactive? What's that? Let alone, Groot being a first-round guy and everybody loving him. I wouldn't be, completely floored if somehow he was a healthy scratch for the first couple or one of the first couple games. I would be a little concerned, but I wouldn't be completely floored. But yeah, I don't expect it to happen, but I wouldn't be blown away if it somehow did. Next question. What do you think Emmanuel Sanders, aka Manny Sands, what do you think Manny Sands' role will be in the offense this year as he enters an already deep wide receiver core? And what are the kinds of skills he brings that could change the play designs of the offense as compared to John Brown?
So it's a really good question. It really speaks to why did they choose Emmanuel Sanders over John Brown?
Someone who they've been after for the last couple of years.
They tried 3 years in a row to get Emmanuel Sanders. They paid Emmanuel Sanders more than John Brown got in Vegas.
Correct.
They had the choice to keep John Brown at a restructured deal, and they chose to release him and chose to sign Emmanuel Sanders. So the Bills obviously have a role in mind. I think part of that is because of the versatility he offers, where he can play inside the slot or outside very well. He still has exceptional get off and acceleration. They did some of the sports info science and some of the next gen stats about how quickly guys got up to their top speed and the speed in their first and second steps. He was still top 2 in the NFL getting off the line. He has just unbelievable quickness that translates in his ability to get open and to create separation. And he has exceptional hands to once he gets open and does that. What does that sound like? Cole Beasley, Stephon Diggs. The Bills obviously have a type. They want guys who create separation and then have great hands when they get open. That's what they want. I think also Emmanuel Sanders plus Gabe Davis makes more sense than John Brown plus Gabe Davis. There was a lot more overlap in the role of John Brown and Gabe Davis. They're both pretty exclusively outside guys. They're not as skilled inside at the slot. I like John Brown a lot. I will always love John Brown. I was the leader of the John Brown as wide receiver one, parade. I'll never forget what he provided for this team in 2019. I don't think it's crazy to say that I think the Bills slightly upgraded with Emmanuel Sanders based on versatility, overall skill set, and what he offers. Even if maybe we lost a touch in taking the top off the defense. But that's why we drafted Marcus Stevenson, and that's why we have Gabe Davis.
Oh, very good point at the end there. I second that notion completely. This was one of my favorite moves in the entire offseason, draft included. I don't think he has, like you mentioned, take the top off speed that John Brown does. That being said, I still think he has enough to get vertical and still be a threat vertically. but like you mentioned, the underneath ability. And to answer the question there and go with what kind of skills does he bring that could change the play designs of the offense, you've got somebody now in Emmanuel Sanders, Cole Beasley, and Stephon Diggs. The ability and route running of those three wide receivers, it's the best route running wide receiver trio in the NFL, bar none. And the ability to leverage coverage and find holes in the defense. I think you're going to see more option routes, as someone mentioned in the comments there. You're going to see more taking advantage of the in-breaking routes in the short to intermediate range, something that Josh Allen has already said that he spent a lot of time this offseason working on. Emmanuel Sanders is great, Greg, as you mentioned, with his get off the line, his first couple steps, finding the open space in his route regardless, reading a defense, being a reliable option for Josh Allen. I think it's going to be, you're going to see a lot. Oh, that's a great point there from John on Sanders.
His last three teams, he was right there going to the Super Bowl with each one.
Yeah, he does win that Super Bowl 2 years ago with that Jimmy G bomb that was just out of his reach. I'm really excited for that ad. I love the option of having guys that are just going to cause so many problems underneath, because you have to account for each of them with their versatility. And to your point with him, you can line him up at either side outside, either side in the slot. He's a great blocker. He's going to give you great tenacity. As someone also mentioned in the comments, I think he's a good leader and presence for guys in that locker room. I'm very excited for Emmanuel Sanders. And I think the role that he plays is dependent on how you want to classify it, with Beasley, but he's either wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3. I think he sees a healthy amount of snaps, especially in key scenarios. I think he's a guy who might take away from Stephon Diggs' targets on third downs potentially. I think he's a guy that's going to do great work on third down, great work in the red zone, smart, savvy, intelligent, leverages the defense, going to find the holes in coverage. A true impact player I think we're going to get out of Emmanuel Sanders this year. I'm very excited. Next question. This is a little bit broad. They were asking for stats holistically, but we'll stick just to snap percentage for this because it's a deep conversation. What do you see as realistic stats for our rookie class this year? This person asked for snap percentage, tackles, sacks, interceptions, etc. I think that's a huge list to go down and break down for every single person. Well, we stick with the rookie class and see, we mentioned Rousseau and Basham getting around Basham 25 to 35%. So let's go next. We'll go into Spencer Brown.
Then
what do we
zero.
Yep. 0 for Spencer Brown, 0 for Tommy Doyle.
Might be 0 for DeMar Hamlin. I think Marquez Stevenson gets some snaps. 0 for Wild Goose, 0 for Anderson.
Oh, very fair.
Hamlin has the next highest chance out of any. Spencer Brown's got an outside shot at some 6th offensive lineman tackle eligible.
The Lee Smith role.
Yes, honestly, the Lee Smith 6th blocker. So he's got a chance to be at least game day active and to get, Ty Secchi had like 40 snaps for us last year, whatever it is, like that kind of thing. Or however many, I almost said Ryan Groy instead of Ryan Bates. However many Ryan Bates played as our extra dude.
That's because Eric saw that film the other of the Vikings.
It is when I saw Vlad Dukas, John Miller, and Ryan Groy. It was in my head. So I don't think a lot. And that doesn't mean I don't like the draft class. I like plenty of the options that we brought forward. I just don't think this is one of the deepest rosters in the NFL. We don't need a lot of rookies to play.
Yeah, I'm similar boat. Even sticking in the back end, Anderson is a near 0 chance, if not a definitive 0. I love Wild Goose, but I don't think he's seeing snaps this year unless he either just shoots for the moon and hits it in training camp or someone does terrible. Same thing for DeMar Hamlin, either injury or he's seeing special team snaps, something like that. And then the rest of the guys, I don't think we're looking at meaningful snaps this year from Spencer Brown and Tommy Doyle and the rest of that middle crew. I think you're going to see the top-heavy snaps from Basham and Rousseau, and top-heavy in terms of that draft class, but even so, it's still not going to be like 50% of the snaps or 75% of the snaps. You're going to see more into the quarter/1/3 range and seeing where we go from there. Good question. I like that. This next one relates to something we mentioned earlier when we talked about corner 2 a little bit. The question is, cornerback 2 was a big talking point this offseason. What is the contingency plan if Trey misses time? Are Wallace and Dane Jackson a duo that can keep us alive, or is that a doomsday scenario?
I would say closer to keep us alive than doomsday. It's not great, but assuming the rest of the defense stays healthy, and you're talking about you still have Taron Johnson, you still have Micah Hyde, you still have Jordan Poyer, you still have one of Levi Wallace or Dane Jackson was already starting at the other spot anyways. Obviously, there are spots in the schedule I would rather see that happen against. If we're going to do that, let's do that against the Patriots. Let's do that against, even the Jets. Let's do that, in some games where I'm not quite as concerned with that end of things. Let's do that against the Texans. But if we're gonna, if we're doing it, there's no good time to lose Trey White. He's arguably the most talented player on our roster. I don't want that, but I do think it's closer to we could survive and get by than doomsday.
Agreed. I don't think it's it's not a scenario that anybody wants to be in where they lose their number one corner. I think we can do things like you mentioned with Hyde and Poyer combined with the floor of Levi. And I think even the floor for Dane Jackson, I think we could mitigate that loss to a degree, but it significantly hurts us. And it's not ideal, but I don't think it's like, oh, Trey went down, season's over, everybody go home, we're done. It would suck big time, and it would make things significantly harder for a multitude of reasons. But yeah, it's closer to keep us alive. I definitely think, I think it is a duo that can keep us alive. I don't think it's a doomsday. It's just still not ideal, but we could definitely tread water with that corner duo.
Yeah. I don't think this is a direct correlation, but Nick's not wrong. We looked ugly in the Titans game, which was the only game that Trey missed. There were lots of other reasons why that game was ugly. The fact that it got rescheduled 3 times and was played on a freaking Tuesday. But Trey missed that game, and we did get smoked pretty good. So that is factual.
Well, we should be fine this year because the Titans have no wide receivers, so we don't really need.
It's nothing to worry about there.
Don't need corners. I wouldn't even dress any corners that game. Throw Isaiah McKenzie out of corner. Have him double duty, roster spot.
Cornerback 2,
CB2, Isaiah McKenzie, and a little quarterback action. He can really do it all, so we're just saving tons of roster spots with Isaiah McKenzie. 11 wide receivers, 15 defensive ends because we saved 17 roster spots by listing Isaiah McKenzie and everything.
Yeah. So Justin saying, no, on Madden, the Titans are a problem. In real life, they have the worst defense in the AFC.
Yeah, the only way their defense, Bud Dupree has to make a big jump. Caleb Farley, well, not big jump, but he has to return to form. Caleb Farley has to be healthy.
If it turns out that Bud Dupree was actually the reason that TJ Watt was getting, 3 in a row, top 3 defensive player of the year, and it was really all the defenses were paying attention to him and that TJ Watt was eating off of him, not that Bud Dupree happened to be the guy opposite Cam Hayward and Stephon Tuitt and TJ Watt, and that he just got to run free and unblocked sometimes. If it turns out that's not the case and that he just goes and destroys things in Tennessee, then they'll have one good defensive player. So that's one thing.
So I sent some Trey Hendrickson level shade from you around.
Not a fan of Bud Dupree.
Not a fan of Bud Dupree. I like the comments here from Taylor. Cornerback wins aren't a thing, but I like we were 1-3 in games that Levi Wallace missed, and then also the comment from John alluding to that. Yeah, Wallace is. I think Levi Wallace. I talked about it last week in the MythBusters episode. He's a lot better than people think. He doesn't get the credit he deserves.
So it's gonna be tough with some of the stuff. Anyone who didn't have a chance to check it out, Joe Marino did an awesome pod all about Levi Wallace and everything about him, and I do think that the Bills only, I want to say they were 15-1 with Levi Wallace, and the only loss was the AFC Championship game.
That is correct.
So it's obviously cornerback wins are a thing. So we can't live without Levi Wallace.
Can't live without Levi. That doesn't sound as good out loud as it did in my head. Which training camp battles are you most excited for?
The return job. I'm excited about the return job, the rotation on the defensive line. I am one who says Jerry Hughes and AJ Epinesa are going to be the two that start. That fifth, sixth wide receiver spot, which also plays into the returner role, and cornerback 2.
Ooh, is that in order?
Yeah, pretty close.
Okay.
I don't think there's a huge difference at which guy wins cornerback 2. I don't think that Dane Jackson or Levi Wallace, that there's a material difference between the two of them. I think they're both good enough, and we have a nice safety net. If one of them doesn't play well, they'll just lose time and the other one will come in. I actually think that we see a pretty similar Josh Norman, Levi Wallace platoon with Dane Jackson and Levi Wallace. I think they both play 50% of the snaps and play 2 drives in a row and then switch. I really think that's what we're going to see. I don't think we're going to see one guy play 100% of the time because they haven't done that in a while. And I think that the return man job also impacts the receiving job and is going to be important and impactful on the season.
I agree with the battles to watch for. My number 1, though, is the corner 2 battle. I do think they will split and platoon a decent amount, but that's also why I'm keeping an eye on it, because I want to see if something potentially happens in camp to the point where one of them surpasses the other one way or the other. Either Dane is just not ready and Levi gives that high floor like he normally does, or does Dane Jackson just come in the small sample size where we saw him cover DeAndre Hopkins really good and have really great zone eyes and pick off Sam Darnold and make some plays. Like, maybe does that translate regularly and he somehow is starting to see 65 and 70% of the snaps at corner 2? That's definitely in my mind. The wide receiver one is up there for me too. I love Isaiah Hodgins a lot. I loved him more than Gabriel Davis coming out last year.
Same.
Fair. Yep. I love his tape. I liked it last year. I like it even more now. I'm really interested to see what the DBs look like on the back end. And then also tied into that kick returner, punt returner role, I want to see what running back looks like. What does Matt Breida do? Are we looking at him purely as like a couple snaps here and there on offense? And he's mainly functioning in the kick returner, but that also ties in the Marquez Stevenson aspect. And then just within that running back group still, does anyone separate themselves? Moss or Singletary or Breida? Moss seemed like he was starting to be the guy towards the end of the year. He got more significant snaps. That's another one that's really on my radar, that running back battle and how those guys finagle out. Because, we clamored for a speed guy all off season when it came to running back, or some guy who had a different dynamic in some way, shape, or form. You and I both wanted James White, but then we still got a guy with a different dynamic in Matt Breida, who is one of the fastest human beings on the planet Earth. And I'm going to shut up because John is crushing it once again. We appreciate you, John, so much. Another donation, super chat, and even when you're not giving the super chat, your comments and your engagement are always spot on. And John says, he's got to bounce. Just want to say to you both, and cover one are awesome. Old man / Bills fan behind enemy lines in Miami Beach appreciates you all, and I appreciate every Bills fan in this chat. Hey, be well all. Thank you, John. You be well. A shout for you. Man, that's awesome. That makes me a little sad. That
Good people.
He's a good guy. Good people. It's hard. You know what? It shouldn't be that hard, but it's hard to find good people in the world today. This one is a bit of a bigger question, and I think it's a really good one. Why do the Bills not play matchup-specific defense? And the person also put this with a caveat of, am I wrong for asking this, and do they actually play matchup-specific defense?
So, no, you're not wrong for sure. It is a philosophical roster-building decision. It would be akin to saying, hey, we should just do what the Titans do with Derrick Henry. Well, that's a lot easier to do when you have Derrick Henry.
Correct.
Philosophically, it's hard to get a bunch of Jalen Ramseys and a bunch of guys who can just lock down in matchup man coverage. It's hard to find a bunch of other players who are all lockdown man coverage. They're also more expensive. You have to draft them higher. You have to consistently pay them more. Mm-hmm. So it's not to say it's not valuable, but it is more difficult to acquire them, more expensive to pay them. So there's logic to build a system where you can be successful, not only successful, but elite. The Bills had number one defense, in yards allowed with Levi Wallace as a starter.
Very true.
So it's not like there's some gaping hole to be taken advantage of. Like, you can run really successful defenses without having elite matchup man coverage. Now, I would love to also have that ability. I would love to have athleticism at that other cornerback spot, and also to be able to have that tool in the tool belt that you can go to and mix that in. But philosophically, they're choosing not to do that because they think it's the better and more sustainable way to build a roster. And I will say, guys, they're separate skills. There are guys who are really good matchup guys who don't have the read and react ability to be good in zone, just like there's guys who have physical limitations in zone and don't do man well. It doesn't mean that man matchup guys are better or automatically can do both and we're just missing out on that. It's a different skill set. So what they're looking for is, ability to read quarterbacks, read and react. Tackling is really important, to come up and make a tackle, keep it in front of them, not give up big plays. And the Bills have run some pretty successful defenses doing that. So, I would love to also mix in a guy who's an elite athlete and can lock guys down in man, so we have that option available to us. But it's a pretty conscious decision that they don't.
Yeah, I think this defense is similar to, and I don't want to put it up there with some of the, individual season and actually in longevity, like greatest defenses of all time, but it's similar to, the Tampa 2, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, or even the cover 3 Seattle Seahawks defense, recently. Like, they are going to play their scheme against who they see. They trust in their scheme. They trust in their fundamentals. They'll adapt and tweak some things, but at the end of the day, they are a mainly cover 3 or a cover 4 defense. They're going to flex in and out of those looks. They're going to disguise it a little bit. They're going to show some double A gap blitz and maybe bring it from time to time, but they are a primary zone defense, and they're not going to flip week to week and, okay, so we're playing this team. Here's their tendencies. Let's flip. Let's do it. And exactly to your point, it's all based on that roster construction, which stems from the philosophy of how Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane like to build a team. And thus, I think that's why we see, I don't want to say the same thing week in and week out, but they're still going to play. They're going to, dance with the girl that brought them, and they're going to do that week in and week out because that's what they believe in and that's what they're about.
And I know Rob Quinn did some research this week after his interview with Jordan Poyer about sustainability and continuity in the secondary, and that it was kind of second to the Legion of Boom and how long they were together. The Legion of Boom wasn't a matchup defense either. Now, I'm not saying our secondary is as good as that secondary was.
Correct.
They had elite players who were exceptional at their roles. Earl Thomas probably could have done matchup if he wanted to, but they didn't do matchup defense. So they were just really good at what they did, meaning to say it's not that, we can't do the better defense. Like, there's no matching up with Tyreek Hill. There's no lockdown spot that you take that away. It just isn't. The elite offenses nowadays are going to put up points. You have to find a way to make as many stops as you can and then to outscore the other team.
Yeah, and just to find a way to make them inefficient. Yeah, and that's the point I was driving at. Everybody knew, okay, well, the Seahawks are going to come out and play cover 3. Cam Chancellor's going to come down around the line of scrimmage. Richard Sherman doesn't even leave his side of the field to go with the best receiver. He literally just stays on his one side of the field, and everyone would be like, how come Sherman doesn't travel with the best guy? Because that's not what they do in their defense. Similar to, the Tampa 2 Buccaneers, even the cover 2 Chicago Bears. Everybody knew Peanut Tillman and those corners were going to play press zone, and Brian Urlacher was dropping to the middle of the field, and Briggs was flying out. Like, everybody knew what was coming. But if you play a system that well, you're able to combat a lot of things, and I think the Bills are definitely made in that mold, especially with the success that Sean McDermott has seen from his time in Philly and then his time in Carolina and even here with Buffalo. This is, I know, to your point, like, we saw what happened against Kansas City and against Tennessee and certain things like that, but as Aaron Quinn has said a million times, as the season progressed, the Bills were still a top 10 defense in DVOA, and they weren't as bad as everyone thinks. Once we started to get the ship righted and guys got a little healthier, and it was a weird year, but this Bills defense is better than we think, and they stick to their fundamentals and their principles, and they go from there. Last 2 questions we got going here. First one, Greg, I'll let you go first. Which undrafted free agent do you see as having the best chance to make the 53-man roster?
So, best is the right way to ask it because you're just asking amongst the UDFAs because the answer is none. No UDFA has a likely route to making the roster. I will say that 6th cornerback spot is probably the most likely spot if you're gonna pick one. I think that Elijah Griffin or Nick McLeod have a better shot at upsetting Rashad Wildgoose than Tariq Thompson does of Jaquan Johnson or I'm drawing a blank on DeMar Hamlin. I think that would be the more likely path. We drafted 2 offensive tackles in spots where they're not going to get cut, so I don't think it's Cyrus Tutele. Some people like Quentin Morris. He's just a smaller, slower version of Reggie Gilliam. I just don't particularly see that path. I would be very surprised if a UDFA makes the roster. If it is, I guess it would be Nick McLeod or Elijah Griffin.
Yeah, I think I'm in that same realm. I think the safety grouping and the back end of the depth for safety and then the depth for corner is still something that isn't completely cemented or solidified. So I don't know how I'd rank them, but the best chance for me, it's either Elijah Griffin, Nick McLeod, or Tariq Thompson. I would probably lean towards Griffin or McLeod more than Tariq Thompson, and then McLeod does stuff they like. I'd probably lean towards Griffin more than McLeod.
We get to yell regulators more often if Griffin makes it. So
if Griffin makes it, I'll change this to the
Warren G podcast. Follows me on Twitter now, so I have.
Does he really?
Yes, I have a vested interest in Elijah Griffin making this roster because I will for sure invite him to come on the show and beg him in DMs.
You're out here regulating on Twitter? That's sick.
Yeah, I have a vested interest in Elijah Griffin making this roster now.
Oh, you have a very vested interest. Oh, yeah. I can't believe you're out there mounting up and regulating on Twitter. That's sick.
I had some well-timed, favorable things to say about his son when he apparently went on a run of looking at some Bills Mafia stuff. So I'll take it.
I didn't know that you just hit the east side of the LBC and then you got to follow on Twitter from Warren G. That's pretty sick. I'm going to stop. I could keep doing that forever. That's fantastic. Pod over. Click. Done. There's nothing that's going to top that. We got nothing. Oh, man. Last question. This is one that was mentioned as being right up your alley on Twitter because it's got some gambling attached to it. So, last year, the Bills. Super chat first. Tommy, love the super chat. Love the donation. I also love the comment. Yeah. Isaiah Hodgins has 4 touchdowns this year. For all those who don't know, Isaiah Hodgins is a tremendous red zone receiver. I'm trying to think of, I believe the stat is 20 catchable balls, 19 receptions on the 20 catchable balls, 12 touchdowns, something like unreal, like grossly unreal. He was a tremendously productive red zone receiver.
He had the best hands and the best catch rate of any receiver coming out that year, including Jerry Jeudy and CeeDee Lamb and some elite
T.
receivers.
Higgins.
So obviously there's a reason he went later on. It was a historic receiver draft class, but he had the highest catch rate and many thought the best hands in that entire group.
Yeah, and especially I think that's why a lot of us were so hyped on him because we came off a year where we saw a lot of drops and guys not pulling the ball down in various aspects, and it seemed like whenever, it didn't matter what. And this wasn't like, oh, yeah, it's thrown right here and he makes an easy catch. Like anything in his catch radius he came down with, and he was playing against elite talent in the Pac-12, so it was pretty sweet to see. So last year, the Bills' win total was 9. This person said, the first time in my life they were projected to be over 500. That was a smash. But now at 11, I feel like they are being asked to be elite. Are defensive coordinators going to even come close to slowing down the passing attack? If not, I don't hate the over-under at 11 wins. Greg, what are your thoughts? Are defensive coordinators going to even come close to slowing down the passing attack? And what do you think of the over-under at 11 wins?
Well, it's easy because 17-0 is way more than 11.
Well, you also got to include the playoffs and the Super Bowl victory as well, so it's even
clearly.
Higher than 17.
So 20 wins. So one, I do think that I actually poked around because most places I've seen it at 10.5, and I like, obviously everyone would like 10.5 more than 11. I actually think it might matter because that's right around where I think it's going to be. I think the Bills could have a very similar season to last year and still go 11-6, 12-5, and it would be a significantly worse season than 13-3. If I could get it at 10.5, I would feel pretty good that I don't think the Bills are going to lose 7 games. And, I do think that there's with the way the schedule looks, how many rookie quarterbacks there are, how many first-time head coaches there are, I do think there's a pretty decent shot. I feel pretty good about 11-6. So if you can get it at 10.5, I think that's a pretty good bet. I think that's a reasonable bet to go after. If it's at 11, depending on what the odds are, it's not as great, but I still think there's a very good chance they could hit it and go over. You're just now you have to go 12-5 or better to be able to hit that, and it's going to be interesting how these win totals work out now. Adding the 17th game, and
you just said 12-5. I was like, what?
Yeah, the 12-5 and 11-6 and 14-3 and all that weird stuff. There's going to be some weird numbers out there now. There's no more 8-8. Now somebody's 9-8 or 8-9. There's no more 500 record. So I don't hate 10-5, and there's quite a few that we've looked through. I kind of like Carolina as a sneaky one. I kind of I had put out a couple ones earlier that I thought were some good sneaky bets, so some things that you can look at. Also, the Houston Texans have the lowest one I've ever seen at 4. I've never seen a team have over-under of 4, and I still might take the under.
Especially in a 17-game season now.
Yeah, yes. And I still might take the under. That one, I like the Chargers. They're right there at 9.
Oh, I'd buy that
right
all day.
In that range. So
I'd buy that
depending where
day.
You have that. I think they're at 9.5. I'm scrolling through, looking at some other ones. They were one that I liked quite a bit.
They're a sneaky team that I feel like not a lot of people are. The talk is still like, oh, the Chiefs, the Bills, the Browns, the Ravens. I feel like no one's talking about the Chargers. And if Staley can replicate some defense there that he did with the Rams, and everybody forgets about Derwin James because he gets hurt, but he is a stud. They have a squad out there for the Chargers, and I could see them being a 10-11 win team. If they can get, especially if they can take one, at least one, obviously I don't think they're going to get both, but if they can take one from Kansas City, that's a 10-11 win team easy.
I made the case that Brandon Staley has the same path to Coach of the Year that Kevin Stefanski had, in that Kevin Stefanski came into Cleveland where you had a really talented roster, some bad injury luck from the year before, and that it was such a monumental improvement of any standing adult that wasn't Freddie Kitchens. You were going to have a huge step forward. Well, what do you have in Los Angeles with the Chargers? A really talented roster with some terrible injury luck and a horrible in-game coach in Anthony Lynn. Like, it's just a really similar spot where he's going to look so much better than what the predecessor was, that, the way the narrative builds of those things. I think Brandon Staley's a great bet for Coach of the Year just because he's going to not be Anthony Lynn the same way that Kevin Stefanski was just not Freddie Kitchens. And Stefanski did a nice job. They went on a nice run. They had a good season. But so much of it was that the bar had been just lowered so much from there that it was easy to look like a genius because you just weren't Freddie Kitchens.
Yeah, that's poor Freddie Kitchens. Everybody was so hyped on old Freddie. Second part of that question, before I answer it there for you, Greg, are defensive coordinators going to even come close to slowing down the Bills' passing attack? What do you think the defensive game plan looks like for the Bills' passing attack this year?
So slowing down is honestly probably fair because defense coordinators spent the first half of last season just refusing to believe that the previous 8 teams that messed up playing man must have just been doing it wrong and just kept trying to do it over and over again. And then obviously, as the season went along, more teams pivoted to zone, and Josh still was very, very good. And we still, Stephon Diggs still went for 1,500 yards, and Josh went for 5,000 total yards and 45 touchdowns in a ridiculous season. But it was a slightly slower pace or lower pace than what it was early on. I think we see more of that. I think we see more zone. I think we see. I'd be curious. Last year, Josh Allen was the most blitzed quarterback in the NFL. I'm curious if we see that again. So there are some things where I could see. I don't think Josh Allen necessarily would have to play worse and could have lower numbers, because some of it last year was we profited a ton of huge box score games because teams just refused to believe that Josh was going to beat them, and then he kept doing it, and they kept just running man, and he kept doing it. I don't think we're going to see that belligerent approach this year. Teams are going to have a better game plan for it. So I don't think that there's going to be some huge regression. There wasn't any, in Lamar Jackson's MVP year, there was some significant red flag stats that, like, hey, he had the highest touchdown rate in NFL history
by a lot.
It's probably fair that he's not going to have the highest touchdown rate in NFL history again. There weren't any major red flag individual stats other than he improved in everything by the most anyone had ever improved.
Yeah.
There wasn't a one thing that sticks out that, oh, this was actually really, really lucky or unsustainable. I do think that I don't expect him to beat the stats he had last year. I expect it to come back down a little bit just in the nature of how things work. Maybe the defense is a little bit better. We don't have as many shootouts or comebacks that we had last year. But I don't necessarily think that him playing worse will equate to lesser stats. He could still have just as good of a season and not have as high stats as he had last year. So I think it's very likely that it could look like defensive coordinators have adjusted, because I think they will. I still think the Bills can be successful and win games without having it have to be 5,000 total yards and 45 touchdowns.
That's a great point. Someone, I forget who it was, and if you're in the chat tonight, I apologize. Feel free to remind me. Someone said in the chat last week on Disguise coverage that Josh having like lower stats than last year doesn't necessarily mean that he has a worse season this year than he did last year. And I think to the question there of slowing down the Bills offense, I think with the addition of Emmanuel Sanders and Josh's emphasis on the intermediate area and the 5-yard slants and better ball placement, decision-making, yards after the catch, I think we could very well see an offense this year that maybe puts up less points and is less explosive and flashy, but is more slice and dice and surgical, moving up and down the field. So our percentage of drives that ends in touchdowns might be higher, but we may not be scoring 5 touchdowns a game, but we're scoring 4 touchdowns on like 6 drives, and we're putting together a better percentage, things like that. And I could see that being the offense, as we know it every year in the NFL. Teams that do great, all of a sudden the next year, as everybody's had an entire offseason to study tape and put their teams together and counter and everything, people start to get a blueprint on how to stop guys. And I think the Bills have an offense this year that can combat what teams are going to try to do to them to combat the success they had last year. So, yeah, I think you could see a slowed down Buffalo Bills offense, but I don't think that'll mean that it's a worse offense. And I think you'll see defenses, still try to throw that zone out there. I don't think they're going to let Josh beat them over the top. I think you're still going to see people that are going to be like, well, let's see if Josh doesn't turn into sugar high Josh Allen. Can he continue to take the 5-yard dump off when it's there? Is he going to try to force the ball in? I think you'll see people still try to go with that old adage and make the Bills have to matriculate the ball down the field, as John Madden would say. But I think the Bills have the offense that can do that this year. I think Josh Allen and the offense are going to have no problem going 5 to 13 yards at a time and just moving and ending in a touchdown. And to be honest, I would rather have that offense anyway, because I want to play keep away from the Kansas City Chiefs. So I don't want to score in 4 plays and 70 yards. Give me a 14-play, 70-yard, 6.5-minute drive every time. Keep my defense fresh. I'll take that. And then the over-under, I think the Bills pocket anywhere from 11 to 13 wins this year. So if the over-under is 10.5, I'm taking that all day. If it's 11, I still probably take it, but I'm a little less inclined. I'm still inclined, but less than less than I would be if the over-under was at 10.5. I see the Bills pocketing at 11-13.
Just a good example as far as like regression and statistics. Patrick Mahomes' MVP season, where he had just unbelievable numbers across the board, shattering some records and things. The next year he regressed, but he regressed to 4,600 yards and 32 touchdowns as they won the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So he wasn't worse. It just he didn't need to have crazy shootouts all the time. There weren't as many pass attempts. It's just a different path to be able to do that. So regression doesn't have to mean failure.
Yes. And keep that in mind for your fantasy stats for all the people out there who are like, I'm taking Josh Allen in the first or second round this year. A lot of people did that with Mahomes and the year before and Lamar last year, and they weren't thrilled with that aspect. Also, I'm against ever taking a quarterback before round 6. I just don't think the value is there. But that's a conversation for another time, as is all conversations coming down for disguised coverage. So I'm throwing up the banner there at the bottom. It says Toodles, you guys. And that means we're starting to wind down on this episode of Disguised Coverage. I want to thank everyone in the Slack channel who put up awesome questions for Greg and I to be able to pull for this show. I want to thank everybody on Twitter who commented and sent us, DMs and everything, and then replied to the Twitter thread with your questions and thoughts. That stuff was awesome. I want to thank everybody for riding with us live here on this episode. It's always great to do this live and have the engagement and the energy in the chat like we had tonight. It makes everything so much better and so much more engaging. Thank you to everybody who was a part of the chat, especially all the regulars who we see week in and week out and day after day here. You guys make this all worthwhile and make it so enjoyable. And I say it all the time, but you guys will never know truly how much you mean to us and how much your support means and allows us to do what we do. And I want to thank you, Mr. Gregorius Tompsett, for being my guest here on Disguised Coverage and being awesome as always. It's always a fun show for me whenever you stop by, and the people by now should know where to find you, but just in case they don't know, why don't you tell them?
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate it very much. You can find me on Wednesday nights on the Cover One Buffalo podcast. You can find me on Twitter at Greg Tompsett. And you can find me in the Cover One Premium Slack channel, hanging out with Bills fans and having a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I'm Anthony Prohaska. Find me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro_ANT. Oh, hold on. I don't know why we keep having this conversation. Yes, Randy, it is a Christmas tree that is behind me. Oh, time out, Randy. I got to pause away from you. Justin, you were awesome in the chat tonight. Great comments, great analysis, great takes, great thoughts, and throwing up the super chat and the thanks boys as well. Thank you for the kind words and your energy and engagement, and thank you so much for the donation. That's awesome, man. I appreciate it. Whoa. Oh, now we got to backtrack. So I'm going to explain the Christmas tree, but then Igor said that he likes Christmas, and it's weird, and we know that Halloween is better? Is this an Anthony Romeo burner account here? Halloween is better than Christmas? Oh, goodness gracious. But yeah, Randy, I fought with the wife a lot about leaving the big tree up in the living room all year round, but we ended up coming to a non-agreement on that. So the compromise was I have this little mini tree. It's not plugged in right now, but I keep the little mini tree on in the office all year round, and then I change the garland to different colors based on the holiday. So right now it's a little red, white, and blue for Memorial Day. It'll stay red, white, and blue for 4th of July. And then as we move towards the fall, I'll probably leave it up for Labor Day as well. And then as we move towards the fall, put some oranges and some yellows and browns for a little fall tree, more orange with some pumpkins for Halloween, and then go into Christmas. And then as we go through the next year, red stuff for Valentine's Day, green for St. Patrick's Day, all those types of things. And I'm mad at Griff for knocking the tree and saying that Halloween is better. It almost threw me off my game completely, but now I'm gonna end up going back through. And Daniel throwing out the good guys for a good show, guys. Appreciate you, and yeah, we appreciate everybody. Follow me on Twitter at pro__ant, pro2_ANT. I forgot to get that out there. And then also a little bit of a tease. Greg and I and another person of which you guys have not been introduced to, we have a cool little project that's in the works, and we'll be starting to pick up steam as we go through this off season and then into the regular season. It's something that Greg and I are very passionate about, and that may or may not also be the bane of our existence, or at least mine, because as much joy as it brings, it also brings a lot of terribleness to it. And that's a bit of a a tease, but we're very excited. We got a special project coming out, and yeah, another world of football that Cover One is going to be delving into to keep you guys covered for anything and everything, as we like to do at Cover One. Best in the business when it comes to the Bills and NFL breakdowns, and about to be best in the business when it comes to another aspect. And Randy spoiled it. It is a cooking channel. Dang it, Randy.
Football recipes.
How did you? Oh, that would be sweet. How to make chili in a football. Step 1, remove air. Step 2, pour chili into football. Step 3, eat.
Remove air. You just got to reach out to Tom Brady.
It's actually going to be, it is a cooking channel, but everything will be based off of tofu recipes, right, Greg? No, just kidding. And then Greg leaves. Appreciate you, Greg. Appreciate everybody in the chat, the super chat donations. Thank you, John. Thank you, Justin. Everybody and everyone, except for E. Griff, saying that Halloween is, Cover One eats. That's a good one.
That's pretty fantastic.
Look at one from Randy. Greg's Game Day recipes.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
There's got some options.
This is another project. We're also launching a wrestling.
Apparently, we're also launching a wrestling podcast as well.
Yeah, I would 1,000%. I'm wearing a New Japan shirt right now. I'd be 1,000% on board for that. Thank you guys. Appreciate you riding with us late as always, and also as always, please stay safe. I hope you and your family and friends and loved ones health and success, and hope you're all doing well. I will not see you. Actually, no, I'm lying. I will see you next week. I'm on vacation for the beginning of the week, but I will see you next week. Stay healthy. Stay safe. Thank you to Greg Tompsett, best in the business. And as always, go Bills.